Shirley, you there?
Yeah, we're back to normal now.
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, it just said you just took, when I signed on, it said you took over as host.
Oh, well, can you fix that?
Yeah, that I took, I mean, it said,
Oh, okay.
it was writing me.
Okay. All
When
right.
it said that.
Well, I'm gonna rename me then.
Okay.
I could name me not host.
Yeah, there you go.
But that would waste some of your time to explain that, so I'll just name you me.
Well, I got a little couple minutes waiting. I will. I said something to Scott Sunday that we had so many new people. It was time to do a getting to know each other event. And I was just gonna remind him of that.
Oh, and we've got to scan that thing in that I said I would send him.
Okay.
I'll try to remember that later. Put that on my list here.
And the funeral is at 2 p.m. on February 11th for Shirley. If you would.
Let me get that on the calendar.
I think I put it on the calendar. I can't remember. Make sure it's on the calendar.
Okay.
With well, I probably won't need it.
And I got to put the painting on too. I haven't done that. Okay, I don't see it on the calendar, so I'm gonna add it February 11th.
Okay, I can't remember if I had.
Tell me her last name again.
Sumner, Sumner.
Yeah. Is it going to be at All Saints?
Yeah. Apparently
Okay.
Paul's already agreed.
That's weird.
What's that?
For the location, All Saints Episcopal Church was the fifth one down, including several out of state.
Oh, that's
Doesn't make much sense.
I can't always figure Siri out.
Yeah.
Hey, Carrie.
I came in early because I was right. I had to update my Zoom on my work computer.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I've been meaning for 2 days to write our pastor about something, and getting ready for this reminded me. So that's what I was doing.
Yeah, so Workshop, you know, we had a staff retreat scheduled for tomorrow, so our regular Tuesday staff meeting was canceled. Then our staff retreat for tomorrow has been rescheduled. And think of that, I haven't heard back from the church we were gonna be going to. Because our rector's father passed away.
Oh, well,
Shock, but not a surprise.
yeah.
A relief in some many, but so it was like, okay, still we're still not gonna have a staff meeting, and I have a show to go to tonight. So
You got to have priorities.
hey, if I can go see somebody at First Avenue, you know, the best music locale in the country, I'm gonna do it. So.
That reminds me, Shirley, we need to check Tim's schedule, find out this friend of ours, Tim Sands, find out when he's playing again.
I think I'm going to more shows now than I did pre-COVID. Probably to make up for.
Yeah.
You
know. Oh, I don't know if you ever have this, but sometimes after I've sent a text, Siri decides I'm dictating everything else that I said.
Oh yeah, it happens to me all the time. I'm gonna mute and try and call the church we're supposed to.
Okay.
Go to. So, bye for a short time.
Yes. Go get a refill. Because of the other thing I'm doing, this is the smallest group you've ever had. I think there's 12 names. So how are things in Minnesota?
Not too bad. Not too cold.
Oh, good.
I mean, the highs are around 30. It's almost t-shirt weather.
You're saying that to the one of the best presents I ever gave my wife was a full length heating pad that she can sleep under at night.
Ah.
And that's with our thermostat set at a reasonable level.
No, it's we haven't had some really cold weather that I can think of. I mean, we've had quite a bit of snow. I drive Lyft as my second job, pay for my health insurance and so on and so forth. I live in the Twin Cities. We have two cities, Minneapolis and St. Paul. And I realized last night, it is true. Minneapolis does a much better job of plowing all their streets. St. Paul, it was horrific. The streets were, I mean, we're talking 5 to 7 inch ruts.
Ooh.
Down side streets with cars parked on both sides. So if you miss the rut, it doesn't matter that I'm driving a really nice all-wheel drive vehicle. Boom, it's like, whoa. So it was good. And I'm just going to step away. I'm going to still be on here and fill up my coffee cup. Priorities.
There you go. Absolutely. You want to tell me how we need to move up north?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, right.
It's gorgeous. But I have about a 23-mile drive into work from the middle of South Minneapolis out to a suburb. And when the trees are covered with frost or snow, and you drive down this tree-lined road, it's gorgeous.
I have to ask, are you the one from White Bear Lake?
Yes, I am.
Oh, okay. My son-in-law's from North Oaks. So I feel like I know your backyard anyway.
Yep, you do. That is.
Well, when I moved here, and I still do, laugh about how they'll close everything down for a quarter inch. And, we've lived in this house 16 years and 15 years, whatever. And I think they've plowed the street once. And that was only because it stayed cold for several days, so it didn't melt. But
that is an exaggeration. It's been 3 or 4 times.
But I used to work in public works and up north and then down here. And it struck me what's really going on is it just is not worth the money to spend to plow a street that's going to melt 2 days later. I mean,
it's you can compare it. Some kids in my youth ministry life called the Queen Metaphor. You can compare it to why the majority of the older school buildings up here don't have air conditioning.
Yeah.
Because you'd only need it 1 or 2 times a year.
Yep.
So it's not cost effective to put in.
Yeah.
Well, you need it more now.
Yeah.
It's much more, and air conditioning is needed. So now they're dealing with the fact that same thing with climate change is areas that have not gotten snow like that before, they're going to have to start investing in the infrastructure to have.
Well, and it's more than people think, because if you're going to put a plow on the front of a truck, that means you have to buy a truck with a heavy frame and a heavy transmission and a bigger engine that then runs the other 11 months a year when you don't really need it. Yep. So it's a long-term cost that people don't think about. You can't just slap a snow plow on the front of any old pickup truck and run it 12 or 14 hours. It just ain't gonna work.
And then you have to come up with names for them.
Yes.
One of our plows this year is called Control Salt Delete. They actually they have a contest, and Betty Whiteout is another one. So,
well, one of the things I ran into was on any kind of decent snow, the city staff was called and volunteered to ride with the snowplow all night, so the operator would stay awake. You know,
Yep.
Fortunately, I always had an excuse not to volunteer because I would have been the one asleep. All right, why don't we get started? I know we may have some other people jump in, that's fine. And just a couple quick things. One is when I pray for us, I plan to include prayers particularly for the communities that have been affected over the last 48 hours by mass shootings. And I'll have to admit, I am very glad I'm not preaching this coming Sunday, because that's the kind of thing most preachers will avoid. But, you know, that's one of the criticisms, in all honesty, of churches is we avoid talking about the real issues going on. And I'm not saying stand up and advocate for this versus that, but I'm saying raise the question of evil, mention it and mention the sadness, mention what people are going through. So anyway, so when I get there, that's what I'll do. The other thing I want to say real quick is, we're all in a flutter at the house because we have a wonderful contractor working with us, but that does mean he may be going back and forth and you may hear some pounding. So if you hear some hammering, that is not Shirley practicing to hit me, much though I may deserve it. It's the contractor trying to repair or redo our bathroom. So anyway, let us pray. Blessed and loving Lord, we do come before you during a very difficult time in our society, in our community at large. The number of just evil, that's the only word that works, that has happened over the last couple days is just astonishing and frightening. I ask that you be with the people who are close to it. I ask you be with the people who are directly involved, family and friends of the victims. I ask you to be with the people who are close to it because they're family and friends of the perpetrators. And I ask you to be with the perpetrators. And I also ask you to be with those who are sitting at home thinking, wow, that's a neat thing to go do. I think I'll pick up my gun and be a copycat. Lord, we ask that the people who can influence those potential perpetrators touch them, find the right words to say to them, help them get through this difficult time. Amen.
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 A couple of quick things that just kind of general things. I've been talking to churches. I'm really loving this mentoring approach where I get to talk to the team one-on-one and really get involved in what's going on and help them and get told when I'm wrong. That's fine. That's, be aware, that's fine. One of the churches yesterday, I threw out some ideas and they just looked at me and shook their head and said, that ain't never going to work. And I said, fine, great. That's what I need to hear from you, that you're thinking about your context and what will and will not work. But two things that have come up repeatedly in both in emails and in face-to-face, I just want to touch on. One is just a clarification of what the social media role is in all we're doing. And that's the fact that, yes, absolutely, we would love to have people contact the church, get in touch with the church, and we'll talk about this actually today, become friends through social media. That's wonderful. That's unlikely to happen. Social media is more of a introduction. It's more of name recognition. One poor parallel is the companies that spend millions of dollars naming a football stadium after themselves. They don't really expect anybody to look at that sign and then run out and buy their product. That's not, the intention is to kind of open people up to be aware of who they are and what they are, and to be reminded of the name, so that when the time does come, their name is at the forefront, is at the top of people's heads. So social media is yes, we want it. We're going to work hard to try to get some contacts through it. But if you don't worry about that. You're still making an impact. You're still introducing yourselves. Another good parallel to social media is election signs. You go down the street and see all these yard signs that say, vote for Pete Smith. Doesn't even tell you who Pete Smith is or what he's running for. It's name recognition. And a lot of what we're doing in social media is name recognition. And it could be, and this one church was talking about this yesterday, you could have somebody show up on Sunday morning, and when you chat with them, they don't even remember seeing you on social media until you actually dig in. And it's, oh, yeah. So it's a little bit subconscious. So anyway, the other thing, and this is really, really, really important, we're not in charge. God is. And I know we all agree with that, and but the implication of that, and unfortunately, I have not been able to find, even before the computer crash, I couldn't find a little study I did at St. Christopher's in High Point, North Carolina. We grew from about 35 to about 120 over too many years. It took too long, but we did grow. And I actually plotted for about 3 years the visitations against efforts to meet people. Mail, and this is pre-social media, most of it. So a lot of it was direct mail or things like that. I could show a very distinct parallel that we would do something, and within the next couple or 3 months, we'd see new people. I never once could track a person directly that I sent postcards to them and they showed. Well, no, I take it back. There was one that we sent postcards to new movers and that kind of thing, and they showed up a month later. I am absolutely convinced, you're not going to change my mind on this, that the learning there is God will work with us. God will provide the effectiveness, the results, if we make the effort, but it's going to be done in a way that it may not look like we did the work. In other words, we can't take credit for it. God, the credit goes to God. That doesn't mean you won't see some. I think particularly with some of the things we're doing now, which are much more sophisticated than when back at St. Christopher's, I was inventing the process. Nobody was talking about it, particularly in the mainstream churches. So I was just playing around, trying things. So we'll probably be able to track some individuals, but a lot of them we won't. And that's okay. That's okay. It reminds us who to be thankful to, and that's God. All right, let me screen share here. Don't want to do that. Want to do that. And there I am. All right, show from beginning. How's that? Okay. Like the other weeks, what we're going to do, we're going to just take a few minutes, and I'm actually abbreviating this more than I did last week, and just look over what we've talked about. Because again, I think I used this last week. It's helpful to me to remember what the structure is that we're hanging this set of activities from, how it fits into the broad pattern. So today we will do that very quick review of our goals for today, and then our overall goals. And take a moment. It's very important, I think, for us to keep remembering why we aren't covered up with new people. And then ask ourselves, what's our potential? And then look at the overall process, at which point we'll move on to the details for today, which is making the first direct contacts. And I'll talk about this some in a couple minutes, what I mean by that. I don't necessarily mean face-to-face, but something that is more personal than simply having a post and then seeing if if people see it. And I forgot, so let me stop that for a second. I wanted to go ahead and mute, and I forgot. So let me do that now. All right. In case anybody else comes on. And back to screen share. All right, so for today, again, we'll remind ourselves of what our goals are and are not, remind ourselves of our potential, look at the overall process and flow, and then look at ways to make contacts for the first time. Let me get rid of that side stuff. So remember, our goals when we're reaching out to new people are not about attendance and budget, because Jesus never said anything about it, but also because that's a very selfish way to approach it. And if somebody's being selfish, we know it, and people will know that about us. But rather, our goal is to help people grow closer to God. And if we do that, it's very likely we will see improvements in our attendance and budget, but they're a nice side benefit. If we talk to somebody and chat with somebody and they end up being active in the Methodist church down the road, we should be very happy for them. I know you've seen this before. You will see it every time because my real fear is people will get overwhelmed, feel like, oh, wow, there's 100 wonderful things here. I can't, that's fine. As I was saying earlier, one of the churches said that won't work for us. And that's exactly what I want to hear, because that means you've thought it through. So don't overwhelm yourself and then just stop. You are never alone. And if you just need to call and talk, you just need to call and vent, that's okay. That's okay. The only time I'm going to be upset is if you stop and just feel like you're a failure because you're confused, but never ask for help. So why don't people love us anymore? Why won't they talk to us? And that's partially the issue is for many people, particularly older people, they're still living in the 50s and 60s, and which means they're living in a time when everybody was expected to go to church. Yes, your church was just covered with people on Easter and Christmas and even other times of the year, because that's what you did. Was talking to one of the churches yesterday, and we were talking about the problem that somewhere around 30 to 50% of Americans, depending on how you define things, are not available to go to church on Sunday morning. They're not available to go. Now, many times that's their own decision, but it's also all the people that are working now on Sunday morning that weren't working in the 50s and 60s because the stores weren't open and all that. So things have changed. Whether or not we think it's good, it's just no longer true. I was going to go through and get you some new photos, but I just didn't have a chance. But, things haven't changed. The specific photo might have changed, but the basics are the same. We hear about churches that are hateful. We hear about churches that are abusive. We hear about churches that are taking the money and your money and using them for things like buying a corporate jet for the pastor so he doesn't have to ride with the dirty common folk. And that's the impression people have of church. And honestly, we wouldn't want to be part of that group of people. So why would we expect other people to? Now, the good news is all that is not a true picture of your church. It just isn't. And the problem is our audience thinks it is a true picture of us. So we have to intrigue them enough to listen so we can tell them and show them. We all have, in any given day, 50, 80, 100 different things we can pay attention to. We have to intrigue them enough so we're one of the ones they do pay attention to. And there is a real potential to reach new people, but only if we're willing to do the effort. But the good news is it's not difficult, it's not expensive, it's not even particularly time consuming. In summary, and I showed you this in more detail, and as I say, I have a paper that explains all this if you'd like, particularly if there's leadership people who are arguing and might be helpful to be able to explain it to them. But basically, somewhere around 1 in 3 people near you are willing to talk about spirituality. They're not anxious, they're very cautious, and they already have an overloaded calendar. So don't start by saying, hey, why don't you come on Sunday morning? Because their day is already packed. And they're not ready to attend on Sunday because honestly, many of them don't trust us. But if approached with love, they're willing to talk. Now, understand when I'm talking about this, there's in very broad terms, there's 2 groups of people we're reaching out to. One is what I like to call the previously churched. And these are people typically post-retirement or at least approaching retirement who, when their kids were young, they were always going to church, or at least most of the time, they were fairly involved. And for some reason, they've drifted away. But church is actually part of their history. Now, they're a little different demographic than the person who never attended church. So we need to we're going to reach out to both of them. Most of the stuff we do will reach both of them. But it is a little different demographic. The previously churched are more likely to quickly try you out on a Sunday. The never churched or seldom churched, coming on Sunday is one of the last things they'll do. So this is, again, the overall process that we need to intrigue people so they learn enough, so they know us a little, so they discover they like us, discover they can trust us. Then they may interact with us. And then, only then, can we build a relationship with them. And it could happen quickly, again, especially with the previously churched, but frequently it takes many, many months. And this is one of the interesting things. The difference is one of the other churches I was talking to, they've been looking at some stuff that the more evangelical churches have been doing. Text in church, text-in-church is an excellent site. If you want to get on their mailing list, they will send you some really good materials from time to time, and everyone will include an ad to buy into their stuff. But, the stuff they send free is good. But they come out of a very evangelical background. And one of the interesting differences is they tend to give up on people fairly quickly. They'll contact them and stay in touch for 6 weeks, 8 weeks after they first attended. And if these people don't follow up, they just, well, the heck with it. We'll move on to the next one. Whereas I'm saying, no, we need to take the time to build a relationship. And today, what we're going to be looking at is the phase of they may interact with us. Last week, we talked about building a relationship, which is by far the most important phase. Next week, we'll look at the intrigue and all the things involved in getting people to know us, like us, trust us. But today, we're looking specifically at what happens once they do have some trust in us, how they might interact with us. So very quickly, the stage 1, as I said, is the intrigue stage. And a good way to look at it is a funnel. It's very easy to get your post before 10,000 people. A very tiny percentage of those will be intrigued or interested, and a small number of those who were intrigued and interested will begin looking at us. So think again, a funnel, like a big wide part, and you're getting down to the very narrow part. But over time, and we won't make a whole lot of investment, some of these people will connect. We're not yet to the relationships phase, but just the connecting phase. So if 99.9% of those original 10,000 never connect, that means 10 new families, which for most churches is a very nice return on investment. But one of our biggest problems is discouraged leadership. That's people who say, hey, we've run 3 ads and our pews aren't full yet, so this is a complete waste of time. We need to explain to them and keep telling them it's a long term. Then stage 3, today we're talking about stage 2. Stage 3 is building the relationship. And the most important thing we need to do throughout all of this is get their contact information. And we do that with being assertive, in other words, asking for it, but never aggressive, never letting them feel like we're demanding it. And then we build regular communications, and we plan on it taking months. And I love this phrase: if we give up on them, they will give up on us. I don't even know where I copied that from. Somebody else. Wasn't my original. But I think it says it right on. So here we go. You are already doing lots of things through which you can connect to new people. You're already we're not talking about adding a whole lot of things, but rather to think of these activities as what they are. They're a worship service, they're a book sale, they're, whatever, but also as an opportunity to make a connection with a new person. And that's what we miss. We tend to get so focused on doing something for our own people that reaching out is just maybe a side thought. So that's one of my roles. I'm going to keep challenging you. How can this activity you are already doing be an opportunity to meet a new friend? And all that said, and you'll hear this, I'll say a dozen times at any workshop, if you don't get their contact information, you basically wasted your time. Typically, less than 10% of first-time guests will be connected to the church 1 year later. And most of them will be previously churched. And I'm glad they came. I'm not, diminishing them. But that's because we made no effort to build a relationship. We ghosted them. We treated them as if they were a ghost. And I've never seen any research on the number who have had less direct connection, watched online, bought a cookbook from the church, attended an event, but never gave us their contact information. My guess is that's well under 1% are connected to the church a year later. We have missed all those people. And if you spend some time thinking about all the different people who interact with your church during the year and say, I missed 99+% of opportunities. So anyway, I'm going to go through some of the activities. I'm going to mention Sunday. I'm actually going to talk about it toward the end, but I'm going to mention it first because it's the first one we think of. But typically, it's actually the least important for this purpose because it brings us in contact with the fewest new people. And here we're going to break that into the in-person Sunday service and the online Sunday service. Then there's non-Sunday morning activities that have a worship component, such as a midweek service, special services like Ash Wednesday, or the church in Colorado just had a service in remembrance of the first responders when there was a major forest fire a year ago, that kind of thing. And of course, blessing, all these that have some worship component. Then you have the purely non-worship activities. Now, I'll put your Bible studies in this category, even if you open with prayer or something. But so you have your various programs. Then you have the purely social things like ice cream social, movie night, game night at the church, whatever, things like that. One of my favorites I forgot to put on here is musicians just jamming at the church. I'll send you a write-up about that. I think it's one of the best opportunities we have to reach out to people in the community and members of our own church. And then we have community groups that are connected, but primarily here I'm talking about people meeting in the church. And notice I didn't specifically put 12-step groups in here because they tend to be the ones we should stay in touch with, but the least potential for long-term relationship. And then social media. And as I've said, the key is to take time to think about each of these as an opportunity to meet and make a connection with new people. So, for example, how is your Lenten program interesting enough that a non-member would consider joining? And most often the issue is our title is boring. And this is directly off, not anybody here this morning, but one of our church's website, their Lenten program is a study of the Gospel of Matthew. that's just not going to pull a whole lot of people in. So we need to find a way to say what we're doing. Again, it's not changing what we're doing, it's just changing the way we present it. But also, as we're doing that, if we do that, if we make it something people might be interested in, they may not join, but they'll have a good impression of the church. It's back to what I was saying at the very beginning. It's name recognition. So let me begin with community groups. And these are groups that are outside of the church and, not members. Oh, there are probably members involved, but we allow them to use space. Always never aggressive, not requiring the groups to be Christian or anything like that. But the question I'm encouraging you to ask, and I really mean sit down and spend some time with some other people and ask this question. When the group member leaves, when the member of the neighborhood association leaves the building, what do they know about your church beyond the street address? And then second of all, when the group member leaves, what do you want them to know about your church? Or to phrase it just a little bit different, you can approach each of them. How do you want that group member to describe your church? And we're not talking about physical facility or friendliness. Or if we look back at the negative impressions people have at church, how could this group member respond to any of those negative impressions if asked? One thing that helps me is visualize the group member sitting down over a cup of coffee with a friend, and for some reason your church comes up. What could the group member say? Once we've decided what it is we want them to say, we have to ask, how do we provide the information to that group member? Well, I think, first of all, it's important that we be a person and not an institution or a building. And I think this is fairly important. I'm going to upset some clergy for giving them another task, but I'm talking about a couple minutes a year. And what I would do is try to remember once every 6 months or so, to just stick my head in the door. If they're meeting at 1 o'clock, I'd stick my head in the door at 12:59 and just say, hi, how's it going? Is there anything you need? Introduce myself first. The point was just to make put a face with the institution. Then second of all, displays that tell your story and change them, quarterly, I just said, periodically, but don't focus on Sunday worship. I'd say 25% or less. They know you have Sunday worship. Now, if you're doing something that's unusual, then you might. For example, some churches have a more informal service at various times with guitars and keyboard and that kind of thing. That they probably don't expect. Okay, that's worth talking about. Always remember the half a second, 6-foot rule. You have a half a second to get their attention with that display. So it needs to be graphic with a couple words of explanation, and it needs to be understood from 6 foot away. They're unlikely to walk up to your bulletin board and look at a 4x6 photo. They're, just not going to happen. Now, they may be walking by and glance over, and if it's a big enough photo and a small enough and just a couple words of text, they can get the impression, of a photo of a bunch of bags of food with an impression, with a statement that says 75 families fed last week. Just something simple like that. And ask yourself, what story will they get if they're there for, say, 2 months or 3 months? If they come once a month for 2 or 3 months or whatever, at the end of that time, will they have had the opportunity? They won't remember everything, but will they have had the opportunity to learn about your church? What have they had the opportunity to learn about? Have they learned about your outreach, your social ministry efforts? Have they learned about inclusion? Have they learned about youth? And you make your own list of the story you want to tell. Handouts are good. A brochure is a good thing, but so many churches say, oh, we have a brochure. We've done everything we need to do. No, It's not a magic bullet. Actually, I consider a brochure typically to be second level outreach, in the sense that people are not going to spend a lot of time on a brochure until they're interested enough to spend a lot of time on a brochure. But remember, and that's the other mistake most churches make. They try to jam in as many words as they can. That's next time you're at the doctor's office. They usually have a lot of brochures about different topics. Grab a few of them and just look at the presentation. These are what the pros do. These are the people who have researched what's effective. And you'll find there are fewer words, mainly graphics. If there is a specific you want to discuss, the church's understanding of communion, do a separate brochure. Don't try to crowd everything into one. And then just place them around the room. I know one good thing to do is have a little brochure rack as you're walking out the door. But again, I wouldn't have more than 2 or 3. If you have a whole bunch of brochures, that means people have to take the time to decide which one they want. You want them to be something they can glance over. So, oh yeah, that's of interest to me. Let me grab this. And then handout specific. This is for things like Shrove Tuesday or whatever. I would go ahead and, tell the group leader, but have them available, the invitation to Shrove Tuesday that's at each meeting place or whatever. And this is, as I say, is a good time for that clergy visit. Say, hey, how's it going? Hope everything's all right. Oh, by the way, we want to make a personal invite to you. Explanatory information can be a lot of, have a real impact. Because if you're meeting the neighborhood associations meeting at your church, I'd be willing to bet 50 to 75% of them, if they even vaguely know about Ash Wednesday, they really don't know. I mean, let's face it, Ash Wednesday is primarily Roman Catholic, Episcopal, to a somewhat lesser extent Lutheran, to a much lesser extent Methodist. But if you come out of the Baptist or the evangelical or the totally unchurched, that they just don't know about. In fact, the evangelicals are likely to say Ash Wednesday is evil. So explaining it helps. And also, ask them to be part of it. Ask them to share the invitations. Hey, bring a friend for pancakes, that kind of thing. I think this is a philosophical question. Am I afraid of upsetting somebody because I came to the neighborhood association and invited them to Ash Wednesday or Shrove Tuesday? Well, they're in my church. And I'm not going to be pushy. I'm not going to be aggressive. I'm not going to insist. If they're Muslim, that's fine. But also, I insist on the opportunity to say something about my church. That's the rent they pay to listen to me for 15 seconds. All right, non-Sunday activities that may or may not, I'm combining two from the earlier list. Elizabeth, you had something? Let me go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I have been looking at the physical spaces where guests in our church are regularly. Mm-hmm. So they come in through certain entrances, they meet in certain spaces. And I had an experience a couple of weeks ago with a person in a recovery group that meets every week. And she's like, I want to connect to the church. And let me tell you, there was no information visible from her walk from the parking lot into that building and into that room. Not a single piece of paper, no image that said, I mean, there were a few things on the wall, but there was absolutely nothing that said, here's what we do and when we do it.
Yes.
Nothing, or just what we do or anything. It was shocking.
Shocking. Well, I can't remember if it's in this slideshow or not. So if it is, I won't mention it when we get there. But Shirley and I vote at a Quaker church. This happens to be where we vote. There's about a 15, maybe a 20-foot walk down a hallway from where you enter the building to the voting room. In that 15 to 20 feet, you will learn about the Quaker church. You will learn about this Quaker church. And not in any pushy way. It's not crowded or anything, but there's a brochure there that you can pick up. What are the sacraments in the Quaker, or the Quaker Church and Sacraments, or some title like that. There are a couple photos of things that go on at the church. And when you get to the room, I'm agreeing with 100%. You've got some impression of what this place is all about. Now, the one thing they do miss is they don't have a, if you'd like more information, here's how to get it type of spot. I don't have the slide here, but the only church I know that has done a little bit along this line is St. Andrews in Greensboro, North Carolina. As you leave there, where everybody meets, there is actually a nice little poster that says, I can't remember what the title is, but anyway, and it says what time the services are and that kind of thing. Again, not heavy-handed. Well, I congratulated the rector on it. It's been several years ago. I congratulated the rector on it. He started laughing. And he said, yeah, the problem was we changed one of the times and nobody could remember. So we put that poster up for our members. But, it works. So yes, thank you, Elizabeth. You're right on. That is so frustrating. And I'll mention in a moment, the one that frustrates me the most is the churches that have daycare centers and never invite the families to anything. The thought of inviting the families in the daycare center to Shrove Tuesday is just, that should not be an amazing thought, but it is for us. So anyway, non-Sunday morning activities, and they could not have the worship component because it's pretty much the same. The Wednesday night worship, again, game night, blessing of animals, Shrove Tuesday, ice cream social, all, whatever. These are different from Sunday morning. They're less structured, they're more open, but the same questions apply. What do they know? What do we want them to know? And how would they describe us? And remembering the negative impressions, how could they respond to any of them? Could they respond to the idea that that church is by nature hateful and will not allow people who are gay or people who have been divorced, or do they know the answer to those questions? And probably they don't. So with it, we have to again ask ourselves how to provide the information. Same rules I had before: half a second, 6 foot, and what'll be happen over 2 months. Yeah, there's my note about the Quaker Church. If a person attended your Wednesday night service or Ash Wednesday service, would they leave knowing anything about your commitment to helping the poor? I'm kind of trying to focus that question down very tightly. And I'm going to be sending you a detailed list of ideas. I'm slowly recovering my computer files. The key will be to ask what you want people to know and then think through how to tell them. And I know I've said that 2 or 3 times already, but it really is a process. And there are, I'd keep it down to 3 or 4 things, certainly no more than that, because what's the most important thing to you? Now, the things people are most likely to be looking for, and I'm sending out to the churches as I have time, just my reflections on your websites and Facebook pages. Most of them have very little information about, or you have to search for the information about ministries outside the building. Ministries affecting people outside the building. They may occur inside the building like a food pantry, but affect people outside who are non-members. And the one church in particular, just thinking about, I sent a note to, they have a very nice button on their things, newcomers, newcomer information, and you click on it and there are 3 paragraphs. Paragraph 1 is the building. Paragraph 2 is the service. Paragraph 3 is the community, and the community is fine. The service is fine. Even the building's fine, but you read from left to right. So the newcomer, without having thought about it, this won't be conscious. Well, you've said the most important thing to us is our building. And the second most important thing to us is our service. And then when you get over to the community thing, there's one word which suggests outside ministries. And I happen to know this church is very active outside. They're just not telling their story. At some events, a display table, if you have the space, and Shrove Tuesday is a great example, you could have an area that just says, if you basically is saying, if you want to know more about this part of our church, here's the information, but make the sign engaging rather than just saying our youth, which is not terrible, but see our youth active in the world. It says two things. It says we have a youth program and we work outside the church. Or you could have one I love, I didn't put it in here. One I love is something like challenging questions we ask. And then when somebody wanders over, you talk about your Bible study or response or something, and you have real life questions, discussion topics, that kind of thing that really did come up. Things like, because that's one of the first things people ask about is, are you trying to make the world better? Very soon, it could be second or third. Can I ask hard questions? Is it okay if I have doubts? We need to get that point across. Again, make it engaging. Just our food pantry is all right, but win a prize. Guess how many people are served in the food pantry in the week? Chances are people will come over and look, and the prize could be something simple. A slideshow with a few explanatory words can run continuously during like a Shrove Tuesday or an ice cream social or a game night or something like that. But make sure it's high enough so people can see it. It's another thing that frustrates me. People do really fine jobs. And then if one person's standing up, you can't see it. So make sure it's shone high enough. And it'll have an impact. That's the kind of thing people notice. All right, some upcoming possibilities. And by this, I mean the next couple months. And understand, I really do hope and pray you will be so overwhelmed that it's hard to do the follow-up. But that's not likely to happen. Shrove Tuesday, I sent you a video, and I will send, Shirley's actually proofreading the discussion on this, and so I'll probably go out later today. The important thing is focus on new people. And that, again, back to what I said at the very beginning, this is the big change in thought process. We think about Shrove Tuesday, we think about our members, we think about making sure the pancakes are made, that somebody bought the sausage and all this kind of thing. And maybe toward the very end, we think, oh, wait a minute, somebody outside might be interested in this. Now flip that around. I really encourage charging your members and then making any guest dinner free, because that makes it special. Yeah, if everybody's free, that's kind of, but there's something just more special about knowing you're the only one getting it free. I would promote focusing on parents. We will feed your children for free. Facebook page, groups, next doors. I'll have like I say, my detailed, it will have a lot of information about that. This is one, probably not a good release unless you're doing something that's unique. And, for example, if the mayor's coming, particularly in a small town, if the mayor's coming to eat pancakes with the church, well, okay. Telling your story, feeding them, letting them feel like this is a friendly church, that's important. That's important. I'm not downplaying that. But to be able to say to them, have them walk out knowing something about you, and then getting the contact information and sending them immediately the next day, thank you for being with us. And yes, I know the next day is Ash Wednesday, and I know the next day is busy. That's okay. You're not going to have that many. If there are children present, say between 3 and 10 years old, ask permission to send the kids a note. And then you'd have to get the physical mailing address. You make quite an impression on a 3, 4, 5, even a 10-year-old if they get a personal handwritten note. Doesn't have to be more than 2 or 3 lines saying, so glad to meet you. Burning of palms. This is one, and again, I'm going to send you some film, some explanatory videos that have been done last year and a longer discussion. But the thing I love about it is I've begun to understand this as, for me, one of the deepest spiritual moments of the whole year, but we seldom do it publicly. And because almost no church does it publicly, in fact, I don't know of any church in this area that does it publicly, it's a great potential for promotion, news release, social media, and all that. Most people, and even most of your members, probably don't know where the ashes come from. I won't take the time. I got a great story about hassling Methodists about that. I wouldn't do it on Sunday morning, because if you link it to your service, that means the unchurched person is much less likely to come. Try to figure out some fellowship so people will stay long enough for you to chat with them. And that just made me coffee and cookies. I mean, it doesn't have to be anything heavy. I will send you some liturgical resources. It is in the book of occasional services, but I don't happen to like our service, so I will send you that and some others. And again, I said a couple videos. There probably won't be a lot of opportunity to tell your story other than the things that I mentioned, like the, you might have a information table or something like that, but probably not. But you can at least announce things like Ash Wednesday, the Lenten Cross, the Lenten programs, and you could do that verbally plus a small handout on heavy paper. Now, personally, how I would do that at the beginning, rather than finishing the liturgical part and then saying, oh, by the way, that sounds more like an ad to me. I would do it at the beginning, have a little short pause, maybe have music, a song to start, and then move on to the liturgical part. By the way, again, if you want to make friends, particularly if you have kids there, let them put the palms in the fire. They'll remember that their whole life. And mention that you have contact cards wherever you have them. Lenten Cross, one of my favorites. It stole this idea from, or borrowed it from Trinity in Mount Airy, North Carolina. And this works well if you have any significant pedestrian movement past your building. And that's just a cross. You can see it just says, leave your concerns at the base of the cross. Now you can do a couple things there. That what they did is they had some sticks, and there was an explanation of this. And they said, just add a stick to the cross, representative of your concern. I love that. Wonderful. In addition to, or instead give the people the opportunity to write their prayer concerns on a note paper and put them in some kind of mailbox type thing. I would use the contact form or a variation of that, making it clear they're not required to do that, but if they'd like to. And if they do, you always respond, always. I'm more and more using the issue that when somebody drops something like that off, they are saying hello. And if somebody says hello to us, we say hello back. But in the church, we don't a lot of times. Thank them for honoring us by asking for prayers. Ask for permission to include them in Sunday prayers. And if they do give that permission, let them know when it's going to happen. If they don't opt out of the text, place them certainly on the list, possibly begin with a general note, asking them what questions they have, kind of an rather than just going directly into the standard mailing, have a little bit of something. And don't worry if somebody puts a nasty note in there. We've been saying how many negative impressions people have of church. And I will tell you, depending on the exact tone and everything, I try to respond to those if I have the opportunity. If somebody says, I won't bring my kids because churches abuse children, exclamation mark, I'll respond back and say something like, you're absolutely right. It's terrible when churches do, and some churches do. Let me tell you what we do to protect kids, and then talk about safety protocols. That probably won't change their mind, but it may kind of mute it a little bit. And when they're talking to somebody else, you may get a little different. They may say something different. Now, this is great for a news release, social media promotion, Facebook groups, Nextdoor, all of that. This is just great stuff for it. And, you know, if you wanted to do something like a dedication of the cross, you know, and that doesn't have to be day one, but whenever you do it, I'd go for a news release and go for TV coverage. You might get some. Now, your Lenten program itself, most, probably 9 years out of 10, all attendees will be members. But saying that, focus on non-members when you're promoting it. And as I said earlier, the intriguing topic is the key question and is a key issue. And questions work much better, are more intriguing than statements. Does God really love me? Gets more attention than Jesus loves me. Try to organize it so each week can be promoted separately. You have an overarching theme, but each week has a separate component you can talk about. And if you can, make it each topic a good topic for a news release or at least a post, and such things like major questions like God and environmentalism. Now, there again, I'd probably turn that into a question. Does God care about climate change? You know, you might have a special speaker. That's always worth a news release. Finally, and you know, again, something else you hear me say over and over and over again, organize. Don't just ask. Organize several members to respond to your post with a personal response. I intend to ask the speaker about. I learned that. And respond in groups as well as on your page. One option is go ahead, depending on your small church, you don't have much money, maybe promote it the first week, and then if it goes reasonably well, ask for donations to promote the following week. And I typically budget around $30 for any one event, somewhere in that ballpark. If it's possible to offer safe childcare, following all the protocols, talk about that a lot. And you might even, depending on your time and everything, offer hot dogs or something beforehand as a little quick meal. If you're beginning with a short service, mention that so people don't feel railroaded. I don't think anybody will not come because of it, but they can be annoyed if they think they're coming to an intellectual conversation and there's a prayer service before it. And as always, plan for fellowship time afterwards so you can meet any guests. And again, it can just be 10 minutes of coffee and cookies. Doesn't have to be anything heavy. Ashes to go. I'm going to send you complete discussion and videos. I love it because it mixes worship and non-worship activities. Now, I know lots of people don't like it. They say, you know, it's I don't know what. Anyway, I look at it as an appetizer. Yeah, some of our members will show up just because they can do quickly and save time. But there are other people that could intrigue enough that it gets them interested in maybe looking at other things. Good promotion activity, including press release. The interesting question, the thing the press release should focus on is not that Ash Wednesday happens, but why it happens. That's the question the newspaper wants to address. The fact that you have something on your calendar isn't of interest. Why you have it on your calendar. What do the ashes represent? Now, if you're doing ashes to go, you can do this at your church if it's a well-traveled road, or you do it at a public place. I really like this. St. Thomas in Reedsville asked permission and was at the Y, 6 to 9 a.m. for early morning people, and had a really good response. And I will send you something here, a sample, but prepare a handout that you give the people that have the prayers you're using, an explanation of what's going on, and then contact card options. You might also promote the Lenten program, you know, just mention that in the handout. So activities which are primarily worship, Ash Wednesday, these are the most difficult to deal with. And they're the most difficult to get contact information, to make friends with new people on, because first of all, you probably get very few guests. And so what happens is we hesitate to focus on them because they're so few. Well, don't hesitate. And most of the ideas above are not appropriate, just don't fit. But still, we want to reach out. And the most important thing is the worship leader being welcoming. And here's that little short video I did of how to invite people to connect with the church. When I did it, it was like 33 seconds, so it works real well. One of the reasons I like the contact form hanging on the pew, if you recall that photo from last week, is that it's available anytime people are in the nave being jargon, including when we are most likely to have unchurched guests. That's weddings and funerals. We aren't likely to say anything about, hey, here's a contact form in the middle of a wedding or a funeral. But if it's there in front of them, maybe. And again, if the person attended your service, what would they leave knowing about your commitment to helping the poor? And how you accomplish that depends an awful lot on your space. And the other question is, do you care if they know? Do you care if they leave there knowing something about your commitment to helping the poor? So the last group is Sunday morning worship. And out of all these situations, this is one where you're least likely to see somebody just walking out the street. But they're extra important because they have made an effort to reach out of you. So we need to make extra efforts to communicate with them. And don't assume the fact they walked in and saw a smiling face is sufficient. If you can build into your and your congregation's psyche, you will never have a visitor, only a guest, and treat people that way. And you will never greet, you will host. If you can do that, it'll make all the difference. I have given you links to a couple of short videos, and I'll be sending you the PDF so you can copy and paste them in. And one of them is how to do a good host, assuming your church does not have a nursery. And then the second one is, if you do have a nursery, adding on a few thoughts about what you would do then. Same question. What do they leave knowing about the church they did not know coming in, and what do you want them to know? Well, assume there will be guests present. That's absolutely critical. Assume it. Just build all your thinking around the idea that you're going to have guests. And prepare every week, absolutely sure you will have a couple first-time guests, and try to avoid depression when that doesn't happen. And one of my examples is a tiny church I was serving. I insisted they have a nursery available and staff. They would clean it, they would keep it clean, they would have staffing available, although they hadn't seen a baby in at least 10 years. Well, about 18 months later, a family arrived, stayed, and became active because we were ready for them. If we had done what the members originally wanted to do, which was, well, if a baby shows up, we'll clean up, wouldn't happen. And the single most important goal always is to get contact information. And I really do, jumped too far. Suggest, grab a couple people, a cup of coffee, glass of wine, and think through these questions, write them down. We seldom think about the fact that on Sunday morning, our bulletin and our announcements are the best way we can tell our story. So will the bulletin announcements tell them we seek to make the world better, that we care for children? And what I suggest is review the last month's bulletin announcements as if you were somebody who had never attended there, and ask what you would have learned. And then as you're designing things, find an excuse to mention, for example, efforts to make the world better, but not always a request for donations. Once a month, one church lists the number of families served at the food pantry. Great, show pride in what you do. And if you are asking for donations, explain why. One church collects long sleeve t-shirts from migrant workers. They explain that all day in the sun can cause sunburn and get scratches, so long sleeve helps. Well, this both teaches and makes it more personal. And again, I know I'm harping, but make everything sound interesting. Next week at 9:30, we ask what Jesus wrote in the sand. Is certainly more interesting. And in your bulletin, most of the people there would know the incident, whereas I would not use that question written that way on a post, because lots of people wouldn't know that Jesus ever wrote in the sand. And then whenever you have space, add a panel, a partial listing of our ministries. And a lot of times, and particularly if you're using a larger bulletin, an all-encompassing bulletin, there's space some weeks you're crowding in. Well, make a list of some of the things going on and make it clear you're intending this for guests, but you'll find out members learn something about it. Let's see, I was going to go down here a little bit. Yeah, assume people are a bit shy and uncomfortable because they don't know what to expect. So in your bulletin, try to make that as clear as you can. I reluctantly like the comprehensive bulletin because it means we're not using the Book of Common Prayer as much. Now, one of the neat things, I'd be happy to send you a copy. One church that does a comprehensive bulletin takes about an inch on their left-hand side and explains what's happening at that point, like what does the word creed mean? And, basically it's an instructed Eucharist. And I know for a fact, members learn quite a bit out of it. Announcing page numbers and giving time to find the page will be upsetting to some long-term Episcopalians, but that's what a friendly person does. If we do jargon, that just screams that we don't care if you understand. That we can be able to, that we aren't interested in enough to be clear. And one of the ones that drives me crazy is the churches that say, we're doing such and such. Wow, that's interesting. And then they say, ask Judy for information. Who's Judy? And what's interesting is people don't think about it. Somebody may have been there 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times, and they still don't know who Judy is. So this isn't necessarily for the first time people. And we can do all this to explain. I'm not saying avoid these words, but teach. And the most important, care if your guests are comfortable. Have that attitude. And yeah, you can kind of expect a couple longtime members to grumble. But, it's interesting, particularly with older Episcopalians, if you say, well, I'm just being polite, that takes away some of the grumbling. Episcopalian is not supposed to be impolite. All right, I'll run through this fairly quickly. We're in there because I know we're running over. Social media is both very easy and very difficult because, yes, we can get it in front of them fairly easily, but making that next step connection is hard. We have to do something interesting enough that they want to reach back. And certainly invitations to activities is one thing. But the biggest thing I invite you to do is go ahead and brainstorm ways people might respond to something you post, something in your context you're doing. Now, in many cases, you will get a response without contact information. And that's okay. That's not what we want, but it is at least a step. I do not like asking for registration for live stream worship service. And that's my philosophy, is never restrict worship. I think that's kind of ended early in COVID. A lot of churches said you had to ask to get the link. Most are now posting it, and I like JotForm to create sign-in forms, and there's a copy of what it is. And again, I'll send you these files. Finally, remember to pray. Pray that not that they be changed to attend, and the magic they, but that we be changed to do God's ministry. And specifically by name, we should be thanking God for each new contact we've received and asking that we be worthy of the trust that contact places on us. When they hand us their name, there's nothing more important they can ever give us. And we should really look at it that way, not as just something, oh, well, and move on. All right, let me stop the screen share. And if you'll unmute. And Elizabeth pointed out that one of the strengths of her church in Charlotte, North Carolina, Holy Comforter, is they have their bulletins and announcements in English and Spanish, which is great, is wonderful. And I would point out, one of the things you can do is you can have QR codes that point to two different pages on your website, one in English, one in Spanish. And what's fascinating, Lorenzo at Tritech, I don't know if you've picked up on it. He's second generation Hispanic. And one of the things he points out is that that's an interesting generation. They're comfortable, they can function in English, but they still like the Spanish connections. So having both available is a really big step to say you're welcome. I think when we talk about Hispanic ministry, we tend to think about the person that's been in the US 2 years and barely speaks English. Well, the largest chunk of them are not that. They're people who are functional in English and are more than willing to get connected if we'll reach out to them. So,
Ken,
anybody has anything,
Ken.
just unmute and
Ken.
Yeah.
Sure. I have two things. One is somebody put in the chat, Know Your Why by comedian Michael Jr. and the YouTube link. Sounds interesting. And another one is your church music, especially if you got Hispanic people or peoples of other groups in the area. You know, there are a lot of things in the paperback edition to the hymn book. I can't think of the name of it, but and some in Lift Your Voice and Sing, that have at least some Spanish or other language included in it. And even if you don't, your choir can't sing it, and I've been in choirs and the grumbling about the language, but even if the choir is not willing to sing it, if you just print it for people in your bulletin with that other language, you know, it makes it at least somewhat known that you're not allergic to it, like so many churches seem to be.
Yeah. Well, and if you have, and great. And if you do have, you know, some component of non-Anglos, I'll just phrase it that way, maybe Fifth Sundays have an offertory oriented toward their culture, and announce it in advance. Don't just hope they'll be there that Sunday. Make it known. Next week, we're going to sing from a hymn it's used often in the Philippines. You know, that kind of.
Yeah, that's important. I came from the Diocese of Hawaii, and we had Filipinos and Hawaiians and of course English speaking. And in one of my church had 3 congregations, my parish, and one of our churches sang the doxology every Sunday in 3 dialogues, and we had the written language in the bulletin as well as the translation for everything. And it's if you have multi-language congregations, I think it is absolutely critical that you speak to the languages spoken, but also provide the translations for people.
Well, and if you have a choir, if you have a choir that's not willing to do the foreign language stuff, you may have some choir members who would cover that as a solo, so you can get that included that way.
Yeah.
Can you tell Shirley's run into that opposition as she's led choirs?
Well, we sang hymns routinely in Hawaiian and in English, and you know it was difficult for people and certainly guests that were visiting from the mainland, but you know people get used to it, and we always put the English translation in there so people understood what they were singing. And no one has to join in and sing. Some, you know, Father David always made sure to tell people that, you know, if you're more comfortable just sit and listen, let the words wash over you. That's a great introduction to people.
I'll have to be the naysayer just to say, I work at a very white parish in a very white centric community.
She's in Minnesota.
Well, you know, and it depends upon where you are in Minnesota.
Yeah.
But that word performative, when the people here want to sing gospel hymns and everything out of Levis because it's the one Sunday a year, and they want to sing it like they are a black gospel choir, and they're not. And it's just so performance, and it just rubs me wrong, and it's like, no. So much different than having native speaking people in your congregation or you know, or having Hispanic people in your congregation. But just because we have one immigrant family from Nigeria who've been in the US for 40 years doesn't mean that we get off in doing, yeah.
But see, that'd be a kind of thing, if the family would be interested, to have them do it once every couple of years as an offertory, you know, to introduce, you know, to say, here, I will tell you a quick story. I think it was the first year Bishop Curry was here as our diocesan. He invited a youth gospel choir to our convention for during dinner. And they had sung 2 or 3 pieces when they just stopped. The conductor just stopped them. And he turned around and he said to us, "You're scaring my kids. They think you hate them because you're not responding."
Mm.
You know?
Ken, could I add one other thing?
Yeah.
That if you're doing something in a language, you know, for a particular family or group, and they are willing to do it, I've done this with exchange students in Kroohs. Ask them to teach the group how to pronounce it.
Good.
Yeah.
So that it doesn't come off as, you know, serious Southern accented foreign language, which is pretty scary. So, you know, if you do that and they're involved in it and they're invested in it.
Yeah. And it also makes it feel more personal.
Yeah.
It says, we're not doing this just because the choir director wants to do something weird. You know.
And another thing you might do is that they may know people in the broader community of their own nationality. We also had a large Marshallese congregation that used our church every Sunday afternoon, and twice a year we would invite them to come in and sing hymns with our congregation. So it was a way to bring in another culture into the congregation, and for us to not butcher things ourselves by trying to recognize another culture. So I think there are ways to do this without disrespecting cultures and language.
Ken, can I just make a couple?
Yeah.
Holy Comforter is a dual language congregation. So you know, when we do stuff, it's not performative. It's because a big chunk of the congregation has a Spanish as first language. So all of these points I think are good. The video that I posted is something that we are looking at, that we're coming back to again and again as we're reimagining church in the post-pandemic world at Holy Comforter. It's about 8 minutes long, I think, and it is so worth watching. It is so worth watching. I highly, highly recommend it. But the first time I watched it, I then subsequently went, I think I've watched it, I don't know, 8, 10 times at this point, but I have gone and listened to a whole bunch of other stuff from Michael Jr. So take 8 minutes and really enjoy this.
And I'll make sure I send that link out to everybody. Thank you for that.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, and that's one of the neat things about this. This group is Holy Family. Is a little tiny congregation in Laurel Springs, New Jersey. They started out when I first met them about a year ago. They had 20 on a good Sunday. They're now up around 30. 30 sounds like not much, but it's 50% increase. So I'm thinking. But one of the things they do is one of their people is very involved in messy church. And, you know, and there's lots of different systems like that. But they obviously didn't have enough people to do a weekly Sunday school. So what they're doing is events. I think it's monthly. It may be 6 weeks, not Sunday morning. They've experimented between Saturdays and weeknights. And the idea is now they're offering something for their kids that's doable for a church their size. And they're moving, you know, the dream is they'll start doing it every other week and eventually be able to do some things on Sunday morning. But the point is, my whole point was, here was an idea I could share with some other small churches. of ways to get things done. You may or may not use messy church. You may use, I like messy church because I love titles and messy churches. If you say, put up a post is about messy church, people are going to read it. Parents are going to read it. And they've actually had some very good success with, I don't know what the percentage is, but more than a few of those additional 10 regular attendees came out of messy church. That was their first interaction. But the point being is if we share ideas like Elizabeth just did with the others, we can all learn. Anything else? I don't want to keep people through well, not everybody is this lunchtime. So pass the time you need to spend. All right. Well, I promise send a couple things out. I will get them out. And next week, we'll actually look at the intrigue, the first step, the getting people who have never even known our name to know a little something about us. We'll be looking at that phase. All right. Anything comes up, you know what my address is. Just let me know. Thank you all.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.